Okay, so let's talk about next steps on your portraits. So you've been methodically going through your portrait step by step by step, square by square, and hopefully you did kind of a contour of the outside edge. This is the photo that I was drawing from. This is an old picture of my son. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna physically mark on this. Now, if you're drawing from your phone or your screen, you won't be doing this, but you can still observe and you can look square by square to see where your value changes are. So all of this that I've outlined right here, that's kind of a mid to dark value. I'm going to identify the darkest values. I'm going to look and make a note of where the lightest values are. So like right here, this whole section of his forehead is going to be slightly lighter. This little shape right here is going to be kind of in the mid-range, okay? So once I get all of those kind of marked, I'm going to go back on my drawing. And if you've already erased your grid, that's okay. You can do that just by observing because you've already got everything kind of blocked off, right? And I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna physically mark where those dark values are or where the light values are. Now, I ran this picture through PixArt just like the ones I sent you of the picture that you had. And you don't always have to do that, but it sometimes helps if you're having a hard time translating what would be a dark value, what the lines might be, how would you break it down shape by shape. And the more you do it, you know, just like with anything, the more you do something, the better you get at it. And you may not find that a useful tool, but I think it will help you, at least to start with, figuring out. And then I would keep figuring out where everything goes. And then I would keep your reference photo, even if it's on your screen, close by so that you can look to see. And you're probably gonna have maybe 4 or 5 values in your photo that you wanna focus on. So like the white part of his eye, that's gonna be the lightest value on there. Around here, the tip of his forehead, some parts of his hair. And then the darkest values, of course, will be under here, around the iris of his eye, his eyebrows. So you can just kind of go through and make a mental note, or you can physically mark it on your paper. You may want to get a page in your sketchbook. I've got this scrap paper right here to test out some color values with your paint. Couple of things you need to know about the paint that we're using. This is acrylic paint. It dries very quickly. It's got like a plastic base to it. It is, every stroke that you make needs to count because you're not gonna have a lot of blending. Once you're putting it on paper, that stroke is gonna show and it's probably gonna dry pretty quickly. The advantage of it is that you can put down a layer and then you can put another layer on top of it and you can layer up your paint pretty quickly. But the disadvantage is it's not gonna blend really easily on your paper and it's gonna dry fairly quickly. So it's not super workable once you get it down. You may have a variety of brushes at your house. You may not. You might just be using the brush that was in your watercolor set. Probably a little soft for acrylic paint, but it'll work if that's all you've got. That may be an issue when you get to the background, and if you need to borrow you know, a brush, you can let me know. Or you could get creative with how you fill that in the back. You may not be painting it in the back. Maybe you're gonna collage it, or maybe you're gonna do some sort of design with marker. Whatever you do, make it intentional. Don't just, you know, scribble something out in the background just to finish it off, because that will ruin all of the hard work that you've put into it. So if you are doing a marker design in the back, make it very organized and planned out, okay? Even if it is, you know, abstract and going in a lot of different directions, it still needs to have a plan and it still needs to be executed with good craftsmanship, not just kind of just filling it up just to mark it off and be done, okay? Then you'll notice that in your paints, you only have a color and then you have white. The color is gonna serve, the base color is gonna serve as your darkest value. I didn't give you any black because black paint can get away from you really quickly and you really don't need black. If you have the primary colors, you can mix up anything that you need, but we're doing a monochromatic color scheme on this. So I'm only going to be using my color and white, and the color is going to be the darkest value. So before I even get started on putting color down on this, I would probably just test out a few things and kind of see how the acrylic paint is going to work. You're going to need something to mix it in, because if I take this blue and dunk it into the white, all my white is gone, and then I have no control over how light or dark the next thing is going to be. So you can kind of test out, all right, if that's the, you know, darkest value and I'm trying to make 4 or 5, it is going to be a lot easier to darken this white than it is going to be to lighten up the blue. And that sounds like it would be the same thing, but if I'm trying to lighten up this blue and I have a, you know, I'm just dunking it into here, it's going to take all of this white times 5 to make it lighter, and then I'm out of white and I have no more control over all of my other values. So I'm going to take white here, and I'm just using an old lid, you know, anything that you have. You could use a piece of wax paper, you could use an old lid from something, you know, sour cream or some kind of lid that you're getting rid of, and that will make a fine palette. So I'm going to darken up this white, and I can probably make it quite a bit darker than that for my next value. And then I will just continue to add a little more white. Put this over here. And every time you add a little more white to it, it's going to get obviously a little lighter. There's not much difference there. I can mix that a little bit on my paper. And then you can just keep going until you figure out what 4 values you're planning to use. I would skip around my paper as I'm painting, and I would kind of knock out all of the darkest values. Then I would go to the next value, knock that out. Just kind of be methodical about it. Go in order. And store my paints right on top, and paint toward you, right? So you're not pushing the paint, you're kind of pulling the paint towards you. And you can kind of get in your own little rhythm as far as, you know, what's comfortable, what works best. It's going to dry quickly, so you can paint a little bit and come back to it, and that part will be dry. If you mess up, it's going to dry, and guess what? You can paint right over it. So don't panic too much. And there are some parts where you have to be really precise, and there are other parts that are going to be a little looser. So you can make all of those determinations as you go. Mark off what your darkest parts are. Paint those in first. Or you could go in reverse. You could do the dark last. That actually might be smarter, but that's up to you, okay? So you're just gonna go methodical step by methodical step and then make a good decision about the background. I wouldn't try and paint it all in one setting. I would paint, you know, as much as you can, then I would come back to it. I would revisit it a couple of times until you get it exactly like you want it. I think a lot of times we make something and we think, you know, the first shot is good enough, and remember, good enough is the enemy of great. So paint it, let it dry, revisit it, see what you need to correct, see what you need to adjust. If you had a hard time erasing all of your grid lines, that's okay. Erase it as much as you can. If you have a lot of grid lines in the background, then you're probably going to need to choose some kind of dark background, right? So, and remember, that background doesn't have to be painted. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. If you run out of paint and you need to come get more, that's fine. You can come up to school and grab some more paint. You may or may not have enough depending on how you do it. So take your time, and we'll see how the next step goes.